Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Today, let's take a look at how to incorporate outboard gear into your Ableton Live sessions. Let's get started. It's very easy to incorporate external hardware or outboard gear into your Ableton Live sessions, and this has a lot of benefits. You can get new tonal colors from the analog and digital gear that you connect in. You can get new functionality that isn't necessarily duplicated inside plugins inside the computer, and it's just fun to have external hardware. You can very easily grab knobs. It's a fun workflow. It's very easy to make adjustments. So there are several reasons why it's great to be able to incorporate these external devices into your live sets. So what I've got set up here is a simple session in live where I've got addictive drums playing. The main drums are coming in here, and then I've got my kick drum and my snare drum split out onto separate tracks. Now the next key ingredient that we need to have here is an audio interface with enough inputs and outputs to connect our hardware gear. Today I'm using a Focusrite Red 8 line in my studio that has 8 outputs and 8 inputs. So we're coming out of Ableton Live into the audio interface. Outputs 1 through 8 from here are connecting to inputs 1 through 8 on our 500 series rack. Now I've got 500 series here today, but this could be any rack unit. It could be a Euro rack unit, could be a guitar pedal with a reamp interface, whatever it might be. We're just connecting that into the inputs and outputs on our audio interface. So the outputs from here come to the inputs here. The outputs from the processors in the 500 series rack come back to the inputs in the Red 8 line audio interface. And then they show up back inside of Ableton Live once we've set things up properly. So the first thing we need to do is set up our I/O inside of Ableton Live. So we'll go up here to Preferences. And what we're looking for are Audio Preferences. And here we can see my Focusrite interface is selected for my input and my output, but we need to set up our inputs and our outputs to support those extra ins and outs on the audio interface. So we'll select Input Configuration. Now the way I've got this routed here, this is a stereo processor, this is a mono processor. This actually is 2 separate mono processors the way that we have to route it because there's a blank in the middle, and then 2 mono processors. So we'll add 2 more sets of mono inputs, 1 through 6, and then for the Wes Audio Dione, which is a bus compressor, we'll make that a stereo input. And we'll click OK. Now we need to do the same thing for the outputs. So we'll set up 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 as mono, and 7 and 8. Now we can also name our mono outputs. So this would be our SSL EQ here on output number 6. On number 5 is one of our sends that are going into our reverb. So we'll label that RMX right. And then number 3 is RMX left. That's the send into the other side of the reverb. So that's our outputs. And actually while we're doing it, let's go back and rename these as well. RMX left. Just being organized makes it easier to manage everything. U and Dione. Okay, so now our inputs and outputs are set up. At this point, routing our signals out and back into Ableton Live is very easy. We do it using a plugin that's included here. We'll go to Audio Effects, we'll choose Utilities, open that up, and now External Audio Effect is what we're after. So we just drag this onto our kick drum track. You can see it's down here, and you can see we can set our audio outputs and our audio inputs. Now I want to send the kick drum through my SSL EQ. So we will select SSL EQ for our output and SSL EQ for our input. And now at this point, let's go ahead and play this back. So at this point, the kick drum is coming into this channel. It's being sent out to output number 6 of the audio interface here in the plugin. Then the output of the EQ comes back into input number 6, which is down here, and then continues through and out of our session. We have control for the gain of the send or the output. We have control of the gain for the return or the input. We can also do a wet-dry mix. So if we turn this all the way to the left, we won't hear any of the processor. Turning it all the way to the right, we'll get the fully processed signal. And we can also mix in between there to get parallel processing, which is very useful with compression in certain situations. Now sometimes when you're routing out through your audio interface and through a processor, the phase will get inverted. So you want to try this invert switch both directions to see which sounds best. You can also adjust for any audio latency or hardware latency that occurs. Latency happens because signals are coming out of Ableton Live through the audio interface, through your processor, back into the audio interface, and then back into Ableton Live. And that takes a very small amount of time. It might take 1 millisecond, 2 milliseconds. It depends on the hardware. Now we can do the same thing on our master bus over here. So if we drag an external audio effect onto our stereo master output, it'll open up, and let's send this into our West Audio Dione, which is a bus compressor. So our output there, and our input here, and now everything that's going through our mix will be going out of our master output, through the bus compressor, and then back out. So you can hear that compressor is making things sound bigger, a little bit tighter, giving it more punch. It's a very nice bus compressor. Once again, we have control over our send gain, our return gain, our wet-dry mix, and so on. Now there's another way we can use external hardware with our Ableton mixes, and that's to put them on sends and returns. So for example, with this AMS reverb, typically you'd put that on a send because you're going to send multiple channels to it. You want to be able to blend those back in. It doesn't usually go on an insert. It actually goes on a send return. So what we need to do in this case is let's set up 2 return tracks, one for the left and one for the right. We're going to pan this one left, pan this one right. We'll name this RMX left. We'll name this RMX right. And now what we'll do is put an external audio effect on each of these tracks. So let's begin with the right. We'll output to RMX right, input RMX right. Now coming over here to the left channel, we'll output RMX left, input RMX left, and now we want to send from our snare track. So our send here, let's set that for our 2 tracks. We'll solo our snare. The reverb you're hearing there is actually coming from this AMS unit. So we're sending out of our track into the 2 inputs on the AMS reverb, coming out of this in stereo into our 2 tracks here, and blending back into our mix. So there's all kinds of fun reverbs and other sounds inside this AMS unit. It's a really cool reverb processor. So now at this point, we've got EQ from the SSL on our kick drum, we've got reverb from the AMS on our snare, and we've got our master bus, or our 2 bus, being processed by the West Audio Dione bus compressor. Let's turn everything on. That's how easy it is to incorporate external hardware into your Ableton mixes. All you need is an audio interface that has multiple ins and outs, whatever processors you want to use, set things up inside Ableton, and you're making music using external hardware. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Click here for more videos like this, or start at sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.